Welcome everyone to our talk today, which is about using Maple in humanities-related assessment, exploring beyond mathematical boundaries in education. This will be a joint talk. It'll be myself and Professor Chris Tisdell from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. Chris is a mastermind when it comes to online learning, education. He knows everything and anything about how to get students interested and involved in using online tools. And sort of that's where the inception behind using Maple in a different way came from for today's talk. I'm based within Canberra at the Australian National University. My background's in neuroscience research, so I study the brain and how it changes, but I have a strong passion for education. And I've worked with Chris in terms of teaching, so we've worked together in that respect. So what we'll do today is the first half of this presentation is I'll give a quick rundown of the background of what everything is about, the study, how we use Maple in our study, and then I'll throw over to Chris, who can give a bit more of an in-depth introduction of himself and his background, and then launch into the rest of the presentation. So I'll just share my screen now, and you'll be able to see what I see on the slides. I have Professor Tisdell in there, so he can give me a thumbs up if everything's looking okay in the screen share. Excellent. Okay, so it's all looking great. So as I said, today we're using Maples in humanities-related assessment. So a bit of a non-conventional way in which Maple is traditionally used. But, you know, as I said, Chris had the foresight to think about, well, how can we use this technology for a different purpose that could facilitate positive learning outcomes for students, and that's where this all comes together. And there's a nice photo of both Chris and I together. It's a few years ago. My hair was a little shorter back then, but a PhD will do that to you. So you can, it often changes. So I'll just jump to the next slide here, and I'll give a background on what this is about. So we're talking primarily about electronic examinations, e-exams, and this is something that's actually very timely right now with the COVID pandemic. There's been quite a big push to online learning and electronic examinations, and it's sort of been out of control for some people. Not everyone has been prepared necessarily for this push, but it's definitely been something that a lot of universities and even high schools have been trying to implement for many, many years. It's been well known, but it's just the best way to implement it has been unknown, and how students respond and how they feel about these e-exams has been up for debate. So that's something that needed to be addressed. In fact, within Australia, in I think 2008, there was an initiative called the Digital Connection Initiative, which implemented laptops in schools. And so there was this big idea that we'd get all these laptops into school, make education system, you know, bring up the ICT within that. But what happened was they implemented it, and they funded for all these laptops to go into the schools, but they didn't have the infrastructure to necessarily support the laptops. So there weren't enough sockets. Students were running out of charge with their laptops. So I think this sort of anecdote shows how the idea of e-examinations have been there for a long time, but the implementation of it has been a struggle. And that's what we were really focusing on today. So, I mean, assessments changed, and that's a key focus. We know that there is more and more of this online examinations that's there, and there's a shift to e-exams that's occurring, particularly within COVID pandemic. So the big question is, what are these workable solutions? What ways can we assess students so that we have a good understanding of how they're grasping the content within the course, and a way of assessment that they're also happy with to engage in and learn from? So those were some of our questions. And so, as I said, Chris just had the idea to think about, well, maybe we can use Maple in a different context. So Maple's successfully been implemented as an assessment tool in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so Chris was thinking, well, this tool, he saw some utility for it to be used in different way for e-examinations in particular. It had the functionality embedded within the tool to be able to use for e-examination. So its educational potential in non-STEM environments wasn't really clear at the time. And so Chris was really interested and brought me on board, and we looked at how this Maple tool could be used within the context of e-examinations and form workable assessment solutions in non-STEM environments. And that was key to see if that would be effective. So what did we do? Well, we had some key research questions. So we wanted to examine the effect of e-exams on students' attitudes. That was an important point for us. We didn't want to just implement something, see the outcome, and leave it at that. We really wanted to know, well, are the students on board with this? Did they care about it? Were they interested? Did they find it better than pen and paper tasks? What were the limitations? These were sort of the questions that we were interested in knowing. So what was the suitability of the information provided about the assessment requirements, the appropriateness of the assessment methods? So did the students feel that using Maple in this sort of format, was it appropriate for given the content of the context, and the overall quality of the associated courses? So did the, often students, if they're accustomed to a certain way of learning, a new way can definitely influence how they view the quality of the course. They feel like, well, I didn't perform well in the exams, or I didn't enjoy the examination process because of this new technology. So we were really interested in, well, was the quality of the course impacted by the use of this Maple TA? So those were the key questions. And so we had the intervention, which involved non-science, technology, engineering, mathematics courses. So that's history, philosophy of science, and history, philosophy of medical science courses. Just a bit of a background. This is sort of a mandatory course for first-year science and advanced science students to do, and it taught them a whole bunch of things about philosophy of science, the history of it, and they also had another stream where they were working on how to become job ready, essentially learning how to have those soft skills required for communication, work experience, job interviews, all these sort of things were embedded within it. And another sort of idea that came from Chris was the introduction of medium stakes e-exams. So we were looking in the literature, and we found that often main components within e-examinations were these either high-stake examinations or these low-stake examinations. And so that was primarily the context in which people framed their discussion of, well, what are e-exams? How do they work? Chris had the idea of, well, what about this medium stakes exam? Exams that aren't sort of worth close to nothing. They're not this sort of formative type assessment to gauge a student's understanding as they're progressing through the course. And they're not also this sort of be-all, end-all final exam that assesses all your knowledge. It's sort of a medium stakes e-exam. And he was really curious to know, well, what was how did this e-examinations work within the context of medium stakes? To give you a bit of background, it was a fairly sizable course. It was approximately 500 students. Some university courses, particularly in third or fourth year, can have less than 20 students in the cohort. So this was quite a large cohort. So we had a large sample size here. They had multiple exams, courses, and semesters. So that was generally the intervention. And here's what it looked like. And this is what Chris was thinking when he had the idea of saying, well, couldn't we use Maple in a different context? What you see here is an example question about Thomas Kuhn and the 3 stages of science. You can see certain features here already. You can see that the students were able to write the responses. They were able to bold certain text. Indentation was possible. So sort of like any word or text processing platform, they were able to do respond in these short responses. So this was an example. We have a few other examples to show some of the functionality of Maple. Here is more of a long form response. They can underline, bold certain parts, italicize certain parts. So really, they could really express themselves as much as possible through this, through their answer. They weren't really limited in the conventional sense of responding to a question. And arguably, they probably had more functionality than a pen and paper test. They were able to bold important bits and italicize certain bits and have clear formatting. So this made it interesting and easy to use for the student, but also as a examiner and a marker, we were able to have a nice, clearly structured answer with clear spacing and have the students sort of input in it. So it was very useful in that context. And then here's another example of where we see bullet points were able to be used, even different colored text if the students were inclined to use that to enhance their response. So really this shows the utility of Maple in this long response, short response, the other than the traditional use of Maple in the context. And so we're here at the research design. So what I'll do is I'll pass it over to Professor Tisdell to take you off. I'll just stop my screen share there. And I'll leave it to him to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amby. Am I coming in loud and clear? Great. Okay, so thanks to Dr. Amby for setting up the first part of the talk. I'm going to finish off the second part. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the design of our study. So the purpose of this slide is to basically show you the time frame for our study. You can see that we did it over 2 years, both semesters. And when we made the comparisons, we compared it with the year before. Okay, so it wasn't like we just did this once and then, you know, that was it. We did it multiple times, okay, because it adds to stronger research design. We looked at the attitudinal or perception data of students via course surveys. Now, surveys are very popular. They're well known in educational research, and we employed well-known statistical techniques to analyse our result. Okay, so we were focusing on the impact of student attitudes towards their learning, satisfaction and quality with respect to e-exams using Maple TA. Okay, so what were the groups of interest? Well, Dr. Amby's already given you a hint of what our groups were. They were essentially undergraduate students in science and medical science classes, but actually I think really you can widen that to further out from STEM. So it could be humanities-based students or arts-based students, anywhere where law perhaps, anywhere where essays and detailed written responses are used in assessment. Our sample involves students in these history and philosophy of science and history and philosophy of medical science courses in first year. And we compared that with the 2015 data from before we started the intervention. Now, I'm not going to show you all the results. All of the results can be seen in our paper, which I'll give you at the end. But here's a key question. We asked students in course 1 whether or not they agreed with the statement, the assessment methods and tasks in this course were appropriate. Okay, you can see the blue bars are before our intervention, and then the red and the green bars are during our intervention. Okay, and you can see the blue bars are not great, and over time there's been a shift to the right from the strongly disagree side to the strongly agree side. Now, if you look closely, you can see the green bar on the strongly disagree is still higher than the blue bar. Well, I would interpret that very loosely as the e-exams did polarize a little bit, but overwhelmingly there was a big shift to the right here. So that was for course 1 over 3 years. And now here's course 2. Again, you can see the blue bars are not in a great position. And when we asked this cohort their attitudes towards the statement about appropriate assessment methods and tasks, well, you can see a shift to the right again. And these were statistically significant shifts. Okay, so what? Well, just to summarise, we found effects of significant increases in student satisfaction and attitudes regarding the suitability of the information provided about the assessment requirements and the appropriateness of the assessment methods. Now, there was no decrease in the overall quality associated with the course. So let me break that down a bit more for you. The first dot point, the suitability of the information. I think Dr. Amby and I and everyone here would agree that when you do a change, especially if it's about assessment, you need to communicate that change very, very clearly. So the first dot point was more like, did we do a good job of communicating the change? And communication is a bit like consulting, right? You communicate, and you communicate again. And when you think you've done enough communication, you go out and you communicate again. Okay, so communication is key. Secondly, the students were more satisfied than previous years regarding the assessment methods, and there was no decrease in the overall quality. So I know, as Dr. Amby said before, some teachers, some professors are a bit concerned because they worry, oh, if I'm going to experiment here, I might ruin the course scores or something. I think it's important to take risks, but also it's important to realise that doing nothing is also a risk, as I'm sure Dr. Amby would agree. Okay, so what might be the take-home message for our presentation today? Well, we hope that the research opens up new and interesting avenues, especially in the non-STEM fields. So you're taking a package like Maple or Maple TA, and you're bringing it to a new destination, a new cohort of non-STEM students, of humanities-based courses. Okay, so we hope that this research opens up new avenues regarding how Maple TA can be used in novel and different ways that are beyond the traditional mathematical testing format that everybody knows. And sort of as a side issue, and Dr. Amby pointed this out before, we were just amazed with how much polarity, if you like, there is on e-examinations and either high stakes or low stakes. What about the huge spectrum in between? Surely that there's something interesting about that. Okay, so some references and acknowledgements. You can have a look at our paper. The link is the details are here. That was published last year. And also, I think both of us would like to acknowledge the support that we've had from UNSW, where the research was conducted. There was a big team that they were all very helpful, and of course the students. We wanted to thank the students for giving us their feedback and also coming on the journey with us. Mr. Amby, anything to add?
I think you've done a great job there, Professor Tisdell. It looks great, and yeah, again, it really fascinating results, and we hope that everyone here has those finds it interesting about the use of Maple in their context. And if you have any questions or feedback, Professor Tisdell's contact details are in the first slide, so feel free to reach out and let us know.
And thank you, Dr. Amby, for coming in today and helping us out. It's been a pleasure. Good luck to everybody for the rest of the conference. So I'll just say goodbye, everyone. And yep, like Dr. Amby said, feel free to reach out and just have a great conference.
Cool. See you guys.